Honestly, there were many instances on set where I just let the women figure it out, and I took a step back and kind of jumped in more as an actor in those scenes than even as a director, because I didn't want this to be. I didn't want this to feel like it was in any way like these scenes were shot by a man.
Hi, besties. Welcome back to my channel. Are Blake Lively and Stephanie Jones at it again? Is there yet another lawsuit filed against Wayfair or the Wayfair companies or one of the members of Wayfair? The answer would be yes, another lawsuit was filed. Does this tie back to their campaign to continue to get people to sue Wayfair? I don't know, but this is another lawsuit filed against someone related to Wayfair. This time it's against the Wayfarer Foundation, which was shut down about a year ago or almost a year ago. And the foundation closing coincided with something that happened to Steve Sarowitz that was pretty significant. And this lawsuit is filed against Sarowitz by a former employee of the Wayfarer Foundation. That was the nonprofit branch of Wayfair Pathways, which apparently is the parent company for all these other companies. And Justin Baldoni's name is loosely tied into this, although he himself had no direct involvement in this lawsuit. He had no direct involvement in the Wayfarer Foundation. He didn't work there. It was based in Chicago, and the conflict occurred in Chicago, and it's a bit of a confusing lawsuit. So the timing here is unusual to me because everything occurred almost a year ago here, and the termination of this woman, I don't know if there's causation clearly connected in the complaint. The lawsuit is filed in federal court. The premise is this woman named Celeste Smith, who was a person that worked for the foundation and had been there for a couple years, had claims that she had been promised that this foundation was going to be in existence for 15 more years, that they abruptly closed within 2 years of her taking this job. She had been promoted multiple times while she had worked there, but she's alleging claims under Title VII, which is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It's enforced under the EEOC, and it's for employers with 15 or more employees. One issue here is that Wayfair Foundation, according to their LinkedIn, had less than 10 employees, or 2 to 10 employees, maybe 15 less than 15 employees for sure. I don't know what their total number of employees are, but to try to weave in these two to get Title VII, she's bringing in the bigger company, Wayfair Pathways, which is a for-profit company. But she didn't work directly with the for-profit company. She was employed under the foundation. She claims that the foundation and the company were under an umbrella. And so therefore, she's entitled to Title VII because of that. I don't know how that will play out. It seems a little bit complicated, but she herself goes into this deep explanation of how she was recruited. She had a background in advocacy and philanthropic work, working in nonprofits. She was working in Pennsylvania. She tells the court she's 52, she's African American, that she's Muslim, and that she's a member of the Nation of Islam. And her allegations are kind of confusing because there's multiple things that are going on. And the timing of some of these allegations are also overlaying and intersecting with the complications that are happening with Wayfair at the time that Blake Lively is suing them, and the threats that Steve Sarowitz experiences as a result of Blake Lively's lawsuit. And her termination happens after the foundation closes down, after Mr. Sarowitz was threatened. This is a really complicated case where she is discussing how she's like aggressively recruited to this company. They promise her that this foundation will exist for 15 more years, that there's a promise that she will maintain her employment for 15 more years, and that the foundation will not be sunset for more than 15 years. A promise of a foundation existing for any extended period of time, that's silly because a foundation can close at any time, right? Anything can happen. And anytime you're employed by anyone, it's at will employment in the United States. And so you're never guaranteed, unless you're on a contract, that your employment will be X amount of years. There's other factors here where she is alleging anti-Muslim xenophobia, discrimination, and asserting that this is a Baha'i-inspired company or foundation, and she is describing herself as Muslim, but then later also describes herself as a member of the Nation of Islam, which is a separate entity away from the mainstream Islam faith. She frames her discrimination as anti-Muslim, but it's not exactly precise because her religion and her membership as a member of the Nation of Islam could present ideological issues within any workplace that could create conflict with the ideological goals of the Wayfair Foundation. And the Nation of Islam is a separatist ideology. They are not part of the mainstream Islam faith. They promote Black separatism and they discourage interracial marriage. I don't know what her personal beliefs are, but if that's on their website, that's what they believe. They teach doctrines about Black self-determination, social organization, and community loyalty that are more political and social than strictly religious. Title VII protects employees from discrimination because of their religion, but it does not protect ideology, political beliefs, or socially prescriptive doctrine that are not central to the religion itself. So if some of their conflict, which she doesn't state, she frames this as a dispute over Palestine and Israel. But then later in her complaint, she discusses a breakfast that she goes to at Steve's house where he asks her specific questions about the Quran and her involvement in the Nation of Islam. She claims that, Sarowitz showed a pattern of hostility towards Muslims, including the Nation of Islam, also known as Black Muslims. But classifying the Nation of Islam as Black Muslims in her complaint doesn't accurately portray Muslims as a whole, because there are Muslims that are Black from Africa that are not members of the Nation of Islam. They do not represent all Black Muslims. The Nation of Islam is a distinct separate group that was founded in 1930s in the United States, with the leader of this organization being Louis Farrakhan. Farrakhan had essentially left the public eye. He was rarely seen. He's in his 90s at this point in 2024. But this Nation of Islam has a complicated history with a separatist ideology, which has framed oftentimes white people as devils or evil, and that there's no way that white and Black people can coexist together. Malcolm X was also a part of this group. He was a minister in the 50s and 60s in the Nation of Islam. And one of the conflicts she alleges has to do with a grant that was asked for by a Muslim clinic, she says, and it's in Chicago and it's for $50,000. And she claims that Sarowitz gets upset and wants to know if this is connected to Malcolm's widow, Betty, she's deceased now. But if his foundation is about inclusion and about wanting oneness in society, his questioning about Betty and whether or not it's tied to Malcolm X could have less to do with Muslim faith, but rather the ideological principles of, is this an organization that is promoting separatism and has racially charged positions that white people are bad? If his mission is to have oneness, separation of races is opposite of that, right? So I don't know if she's framing this as anti-Muslim to kind of walk around what the beliefs and the arguments might actually be about. And that at its core might not be about religion at all. And Steve, as the founder and the primary person that provides the money for the grant, does have the right to scrutinize whether or not he wants to donate to organizations that do not align with the core beliefs that he holds. And those are ideological beliefs. Sure, they are from his religion, but separatism is a very extreme belief system. Not believing in interracial marriage is very extreme. At times, the Nation of Islam has held anti-Semitic positions. And so there's a lot with the Nation of Islam that has controversy that he just might not want to be connected to. It doesn't mean that he can't have friends that are part of it, but if she's also expressing these feelings in at the workplace that contradict the goal and the mission of this company, she might not have been a good fit, right? As an employer, if your employees don't meet the mission of what the culture is of your church, of your mission, of your foundation, and they're creating hostile environments and disrupting the mission of the foundation itself, that may not be about religion at all. It might just be ideological, political. Interestingly, she took a position at a Baha'i inspired company while also being a member of the Nation of Islam, right? So I don't know how much the religious discrimination is going to come into play. And if you know anything about the Baha'i faith, they use the Quran, and it comes out of and is more aligned to the Islam than it is to Judaism. And so he would know the Quran as a part of Baha'i. It's not everything for them, but they have parts of the Quran that they use. And so he would understand the Quran as well. And there's discrepancies in the mainstream Muslim faith that they don't recognize the Nation of Islam as part of their belief system. They say they're separate. They're not part of us. They don't believe something that we do. With that said, she frames things like this as discriminatory. And then there's an age discrimination that comes in where she tries to say that due to escalating hostility over Palestine and Israel and this Black Muslim belief system, which we should just say is anti-Nation of Islam ideology, not religion. That in and of itself, she's framing as discrimination, but then she also ties into that, okay, after some point in time, the hostility gets so high that there's an outburst by him at an event in the fall of 2024. He's very concerned about people being pro-Palestinian and expressing solidarity with Palestinians. And I don't know if this is how she's framing it, and that he gets angry and he's at an event. He eventually apologizes to them, but ultimately the director doesn't allow him to come to the foundation anymore, even though he's the primary founder, he's the money giver, and they say he can't come to the office. Then he finally comes back to the office. He apologizes. The CEO then takes a leave of absence. Then she quits. And in that period, he needs to fill a position. And when that person leaves, he has no legal obligation to post a job opening because it's an emergency filling, like of a seat that's necessary for this company. And so in the interim, while he doesn't have the time to go through to find the new CEO, he ends up giving this interim position to Jennifer Weigel, who she describes as 8 years younger than her, which is factually just not true. Jennifer is 2 years older than her. She's 56. She is a 3-time Emmy award-winning journalist from Chicago that worked on the community development side of the Chicago Times. She is very, very like public facing. She has owned a production company since 2002, and she already had an established relationship with this foundation. She had experience working with nonprofits, and she was an award-winning journalist. She was a local news journalist that was like a star there that has tons of public-facing PR communication skills and has worked in community development. So to him, he places her in this position and she feels, Celeste, that she has better qualifications to take on that position. She feels like she's discriminated against because he didn't have a hiring process and there was no hiring process and there was no open position. So she wasn't allowed to apply, but there's no legal requirement for a position to have a job opening and interviews for an interim position. So then there's an injury for her, and she tries to get ADA, and then she's claiming that there's there's age discrimination, again, wrongly with Jennifer, because Jennifer, she claims, is 8 years younger than her, but she's 2 years older than her. Jennifer is 55 and she is 52. Then she claims that there's all these issues that she has where Jennifer is making all kinds of demands to her to get things done. She's on leave because she hurts her rib at home and she's gets restricted work for 4 hours a day. And she files all these complaints against Jennifer, against Steve. There's all kinds of conflicts happening here where she's mad that Jennifer gets this position, and then essentially everything that Jennifer's doing she gets mad at, and she's filing all these complaints against her, and then everything that she says that they do to her and respond to her is retaliatory. She files complaints against him. She files complaints against Jennifer. She files complaints against Wayfarer Foundation while she's on leave, while she's, hurt her ribs and she can only work 4 hours a day remotely. And then in the middle of that, at the end of April, Steve's house, someone tries to set his house on fire. A man attempts to abduct and threatens to amputate and burn down the house. He threatens to amputate and abduct and harm Steve's daughter, his wife. He sends threats that are graphic and disturbing. This all happens on April 28th. By the 2nd of May, before anyone has been arrested, and while Steve, is facing increased threats to his safety, he doesn't know who this person is, if his daughter and wife are safe, he shuts down the foundation out of fear for his safety, out of fear for the safety of those that work there, and he closes the foundation. She says that the foundation is not really closed. They just moved it to the Pathways company, and they did this to avoid the HR complaints that were filed against them. And they shut down the HR department to not have to investigate anything. And that some of the employees went and took positions at this department that they created at the Wayfair Pathways company, which then became more about community development. And she claims she was discriminated against again for age because he hired someone to be the leader of this department that she felt she was entitled to be, that was younger than her and white and a Baha'i. She says that Steve wanting to hire his she was pressured to hire his nephew when she didn't want to hire his nephew. She is trying to claim that like nepotism is illegal, and it's not. And he, as the founder of the company, has the right to really hire whoever he wants to hire for these positions. And I think what an argument would be is if they don't file a motion to dismiss because some of these claims are just pled completely incorrectly because the age discrimination does not happen, they're going to argue that this has nothing to do with religion, but this has to do with ideological conflicts. And if he has hired someone for his foundation that conflicts with the mission, that's a huge problem. So think of it this way. Her belief system, or at least the ideology, I don't know what she specifically believes, but Nation of Islam advocates for Black separatism, rejects mixed race marriages. It emphasizes racial and religious separation. There are social and ideological stances tied to her religious identity, but not protected under Title VII if they affect workplace dynamics. She has a right to hold those beliefs, but if her ideology becomes a problem in the workplace, that is not about religion at all. Steve's foundation promotes inclusion, oneness, unity across all races and faiths, and broadly collaborative humanitarian work. It values diversity and organizational cohesion. So if there's a conflict and she is actively promoting a separatist ideology or discourages collaboration It could undermine the mission and the messaging. It could create tension and leadership in discussions, especially with diverse teams. It could be perceived as even poisoning the workplace culture if it's even unintentional, if her views influence hiring, mentoring, or internal policy discussions. Title VII protects religion and associated practices, but it doesn't protect ideological activism and that harms the organization or conflicts with the mission. So if her NOI beliefs completely contradict and advocate for positions that are contrary to Sarowitz's inclusive mission, the foundation could argue that the actions were taken. It's about workplace performance and culture, not bias, religious bias. She's a high-level executive who influences the culture and the decision making. And if a lot of the tension is arising based upon her influence and who she's hiring and who she's bringing in, there could be a serious misalignment that could affect partnerships, donors, and the public perception. And my guess is that she's framing this on the larger Muslim argument because the overall controversy in and of itself of the Nation of Islam and that separatist ideology. It's hard to prove discrimination in this because it would appear that she's presenting all of her ideology as religion, and ideology is not religion. I think when you have people that have a different goal, any employer has a right to not want to work with that person if they're causing conflict in this space. And she references all these other people being impacted and affected by it, but she doesn't say names. She doesn't talk about what the complaints are. She doesn't say how they're impacted, why they're impacted, if these people that are impacted are Muslim or not. She doesn't say any of these things. This complaint feels very flimsy. And she also mentions that she was offered a separation agreement where she would get 2 months of paid and she would be done on May 2nd. And she's arguing that other people were brought into the Pathways company. And she's claiming she's not brought over there because they're discriminating against her religion. But maybe they're not discriminating, and maybe they're saying your ideology of separatism is not cohesive with our company. You are an incompatible fit. And they have a right to say that. And if that ideology can impact others around her, it could create unnecessary tension. So when she's framing about loyalty and are you aligned with this company? Are you aligned with our mission? That could be what he's trying to figure out. Do you care about the mission of our company, or are you here for your own agenda? At the end of the day, this is going to be a tough one for her to win. I don't see this being religious discrimination, at least from her vague complaint. But more importantly, it begs the question of why is she filing this now? This all happened last year. She says it starts in October of 2024, which those complaints she has from that point in time are time barred. She would have had to file a complaint about that within 300 days with the EEOC, and she did not. The other religious complaints that she has could also be time barred if they occurred within 300 days of November of 2025. So if something happened in January of 2025, that could be time barred as well. And now it's 2026, and now she's filing a lawsuit, and she's filing a lawsuit after a summary judgment is filed in the case with Wayfair. It's employment discrimination. It's another headline to make them look like they're doing something wrong. Is she being influenced by Stephanie Jones? Is she being influenced by Blake Lively? Is the attorney trying to capitalize on this notoriety of what's happening with Wayfair? Is this a money grab? There's a lot of questions here that just don't make a lot of sense to me. If she signed a severance agreement and was given 2 months of pay, and then she's doing this now all these months later, that seems like she's waived her claims. And I don't know if she signed it or not. But what's the motivation? And is it really anti-discrimination, or is it, I don't agree with your ideology and your ideology is harming the mission of our company? But then also, we're not shutting down our company because of you. We're shutting down the company because there were threats against my wife's life, my child's life, arson. People were threatening to come into my house and burn my house down. He became the victim of all kinds of anti-Semitic threats because of Blake Lively's complaint. Him shutting down his foundation has nothing to do with her, even though she tries, in my opinion, to say that it does. So I just don't know when these lawsuits are going to stop and who's finding these people to get them to do these things. And why are these lawyers filing these lawsuits? The lawyers have a duty to make sure that what they're filing is accurate. And if you file a lawsuit and you're claiming age discrimination, you should probably verify if the woman is younger than you. And in this case, she's not. She's older and she's highly qualified. A lot of this honestly sounds like a personal grievance that I wasn't picked to be the CEO. I didn't get to inform this company the way I wanted to inform it. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do, and I was fired. And it's being packaged as discrimination, which I just don't see I don't see that working, but that's just my opinion. And Steve has a right to defend his foundation's ideological principles, which could be in direct conflict to a separatist ideology, if that's what she holds. So what are your thoughts? Do you think this is Blake Lively? Do you think it's Stephanie Jones? Do you think this is like the timing is odd? What are your thoughts about that? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.